No.
Mommy,
Yeah, babe.
I can't wait for empathy and AIDS to be here.
I know.
For dinner, are we gonna have s'mores?
Yes. What's up, guys? Thanks again for watching. Hey, if you're interested in some behind the scenes bonus footage of this project, there's quite a bit you did not get a chance to see, such as a huge mistake I made and what I did to fix it. Okay, let's cut right to the chase. I sanded through the veneer. Yeah. I haven't sanded through a veneer piece in a very long time. I'm talking 3 years. I thought I had learned that lesson long ago, but as I have researched, it happens to the best of us, and I think I have a good excuse of why. So this dresser was originally a blonde dresser, meaning the finish was not the original tone of the wood. It had a toner and a stain on it that made it appear lighter than the actual wood. The closest thing I ever got to refinishing a blonde dresser is a Haywood Wakefield buffet that I got my hands on, and I custom ordered a Haywood Wakefield finish to go over it. But typically a blonde dresser is kind of a risk to refinish because you're not exactly sure what the wood grain is going to look like, and if there's anything the manufacturers hid underneath the stain that wouldn't be noticeable once the stain was applied. This piece was also a Red Lion dresser. I had never refinished a Red Lion dresser, and I've always wanted to. So as with every dresser, I started with a scraper just to see if it would scrape off very easily. A scraper is typically a very cost-efficient way when used correctly to get the finish off, but there are times when the finish is very stubborn and a scraper is not going to cut it. Once I started scraping, it looked like I had exposed the wood. It was looking really pretty, and then I was just gonna go over it with a light sand as I normally do. But when I started sanding, I noticed that it was getting darker, which is very opposite than what I'm used to, because typically if it is getting lighter, that means you're burning through the veneer. It just messed with my brain. Really, the stain was so deep in the wood grain that I needed to sand more than I normally would. So the more I sanded, the more I got down to this beautiful color, but it took so much more sanding than I ever wanted to do. That being said, the sun was shining right on this spot of the dresser that I was sanding, and I burned through the veneer. I didn't even notice I burned through the veneer until I started using mineral spirits to clean off the dresser, and I noticed a huge veneer spot that I burned through. If you don't know, veneer is a very thin piece of wood glued on to a more sturdy but less pretty piece of wood. Mid-century modern furniture is typically veneer, and I had been used to that, and I know how small it is, but with the sun shining on it in the right spot, my eyes did not see how I was burning through the veneer quite a bit. Once I noticed I burned through the veneer, I definitely was a little devastated because it's hard to come back from that. So I went right to YouTube to Google what to do when you burn through the veneer. And to be honest, there was not a ton of videos that were helpful, but I did find a few. And that's when I came across a product that I had been wanting to buy for a long time, and that is the Mohawk powder stains. Trying to mimic wood grain is difficult. It takes time, it takes practice. And this is my first time ever trying to mimic wood grain with such a large part of the dresser. So it took me a lot of attempts, let's just say. I would do it and then it would turn out terrible. Or I would do it and it looked good inside my garage, but then I brought it outside and it looked terrible. And then I would resand, and then I would try again. If it was too dark, which it was, then I resanded and did it again, and resanded and did it again. I wanted to do a good job because if you have such a large issue with the top of the dresser, it's just not gonna sell that much. And this is my time to practice. Eventually, I did get to a point where I was able to blend it the best of my abilities, and it was virtually not noticeable, which is my goal. The people who bought the dresser even looked at my husband and I and were like, "Where's the spot?" And when we pointed at it, they had no idea what we were talking about. That's the goal, right? Well, it took me a few times to get that goal going. We're learning, right? We're learning. So if it isn't already obvious, what I wish I would have done differently is started with a chemical stripper. A chemical stripper, acetone, anything but scraping and sanding probably would have done a better job at maintaining the integrity of the veneer. especially with that little ridged area at the top of the dresser. That would have been so much easier with acetone. It would have got it out so quickly. I wouldn't have had to use that scraper. But these are things I'm learning, and I will be much more effective next time when I come across these kinds of details. The sides of the dresser were a little bit lighter than the actual drawer fronts and the top. I'm not exactly sure if that was because I didn't sand deep enough, because I was afraid to burn through a veneer again, or they just didn't care if the wood grain matched perfectly because the manufacturer was going to spray it and coat it with a cohesive blonde stain anyways. Before I sealed it, I probably would have tried to match it a little bit better to see if I could get a more cohesive color. Overall, I think this dresser turned out great. I think it looks better not blonde. I'm sorry to all the people who love blonde finish. The wood grain was beautiful. The warm tone was beautiful. And the legs were beautiful. It just was a great piece. What I learned from this project the most is that fixing your mistake takes time and to be patient. Sometimes it's not a quick fix. Most of the time, it's not a quick fix. And I really wanted to take my time and learn the method of mimicking wood grain. There's only one way to learn that, and that's through a damaged piece. So in a way, it was a good thing because it gave me practice. I hope you all love the end results of this project as much as I did. Again, thanks so much for watching. And if you like this kind of stuff, click like and subscribe. I'll be posting 3 projects a month. Stay tuned for next time. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great time at your life. I'm projected to post 3 projects. I did. Awkward, awkward, awkward. You're awkward. Oh gosh.